Over the weeks I've been building my own custom shop Telecaster style guitar, something that I hope will equal the Fender Custom Shop guitars I have here in the studio at a much lower cost and produced using fairly basic tools. Now in part 1 I looked at the foundation of any guitar project, the body and neck choices available, and the reasons why I made the choices I did. In part 2 it was about sealing, priming, first coat neck lacquer stage and Danish oil for the fretboard. In part 3 was the colour and clear coats, placing decals on the headstock and final coats of amber lacquer. And in part 4 I'm going to look at aging metal, the accessories I've chosen for this project guitar build. Hello viewer, my name's Stu. Please do check out the rest of my channel as it covers my return journey back to playing and recording guitar after a 40-year break. Now a big thank you to those that take time to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, share and comment below. So in part 4 of this video series coming up, number 1, a very quick overview of the stages involved regarding parts 1, 2 and 3. Number 2, the accessories, hardware and electrics chosen, including modifications. Number 3, aging chrome and nickel parts. Number 4, conclusion, final thoughts. So without further ado, number 1, if you haven't watched parts 1, 2 and 3 and you're new to guitar building, please do watch those as you'll find them helpful. In part 1, I ordered a 3-piece roasted alder T style body and a custom modified roasted flame maple neck with an Indian rosewood fretboard, making sure that all the accessories chosen would fit without any major issues. In part 2, sanding sealer and primer are applied to the body and the first amber lacquer coats are applied to the neck and headstock, while the rosewood fretboard was treated to Danish oil. In part 3, the metallic colour was applied along with clear coat lacquer, while the headstock was given its name badge, followed by the final amber lacquer coats. So moving on, number 2. So now we look at all the hardware that will complete this build project. So first off, as I mentioned in part 1, the body and in particular the neck is the foundation for the guitar build project. If you're going to all the trouble and expense of building a guitar in an age where there are so many used guitar deals available, best to choose wisely. Secondly, the finishing of the body and neck is again important because if you're applying various paints and lacquers looking to get a professional finish, you need to take care not to use materials that are incompatible or are of poor quality. If you're disappointed with the results, you're likely to reject the guitar and therefore it'll never get played. And now, the accessories. Generally speaking, these parts, they can be changed, swapped out. If you change your mind about your initial choices, you can likely resell those parts or use them for another project. Now, I will mention I had a bit of time ordering parts, the parts I wanted and parts I was willing to spend money on, and others that I didn't think warranted to spend too much money on. I found myself using quite a number of vendors to be able to achieve that, bearing in mind I needed to nail down certain criteria as I put my order in for a body and customized neck. I found many vendors were completely out of stock of so many products, including certain paints and lacquers. So first on my list, in no particular order, looking at the electrical type parts to start. Number 1, the electrics pickup choice. This is definitely a personal thing. While I trawled through various reviews on pickups, I had a general idea of what I was looking for. Something that had a classic Fender tone with a bit of growl to it. Now, while I looked into the likes of Bare Knuckle, which are expensive, and Seymour Duncan offerings, I settled on a set of Fender Custom Shop Texas specials for the Telecaster at £142 for the set. Now I am familiar with this type as I did a review on a Custom Shop Stratocaster loaded with Texas specials within a roasted alder body, the wood style of my own custom build. So there shouldn't be too many surprises regarding tone. For those interested, I did put those pickups into a Fender Squire debut Telecaster, so if that interests you, have a listen as to how that upgrade worked out. This pickup set is geared towards the vintage setup, and the neck pickup screws into the body and not the scratch plate. Of course, you can easily change that, and that's what I did on that Squire debut Telecaster video. As with the neck and body alignment fitting, pickup choice is going to have a significant bearing on the tone and how you play the guitar. So while there are many choices out there, and no, you don't have to spend huge sums of money, but if you're going to go to the trouble of building a custom guitar, then choosing pickups that fit with your musical style and tonal needs, it's not to be skimped on. So the pickups, of course, connect to a control system. And I know this is a bit of a cheat, but I already had a spare Fender Custom Shop Telecaster fully loaded control plate, although it didn't come with any control knobs or the selector tip switch. Now, you can purchase various Telecaster control plate kits in a range of prices, but I would say it's worth looking at making the plate up yourself out of individual parts. Now, these plates come in anywhere between £30 and £100. As for the nickel-plated volume and tone knobs, they cost me £5.50 for both of them, and the selector top hat tip switch, that was £1.50. So no need to spend more on Fender genuine parts here. The top hat tip switch needed to be drilled out to fit the selector blade, but that was simply enough to do. Again, on electrics, wiring is an important consideration, and I purchased a length of vintage style standard 22 gauge hookup wire, which I'm going to be using for an earth wire and connectors to the 1/4-inch jack socket. Twisting or braiding the wires is a common practice to help with earthing insulation, and this vintage style wiring is a bit more expensive, but I felt it was worth getting, and that was £5.50. Still on electrics, the jack socket. The 1/4-inch jack socket is a good quality Switchcraft mono socket, costing around £6.49. I would say don't cheap out on the jack socket. It's not worth the hassle. It's common to end up with a poor jack connection to your amplifier if you do use cheap sockets. Now, I was going to fit this to a genuine Fender vintage jack ferrule, but the fitting of the plate was a real pest, since it really needs a specialised tool to fit it. And like so many others, I decided to swap that out for an electro socket jack socket plate, which is a non-branded Telecaster replacement part. Much simpler and cheaper, and as I'm not trying to be period correct with this guitar, this will do nicely, and it was a good price at $5.99. Again, on electrics, insulation paint. I might be using Ruston's shielding paint instead of copper foil. Not all shielding paint is equal, and stirring thoroughly is required to make sure all the goodness at the bottom of the tin is well mixed. Now, this tin costs $7.99. Something to be aware of, shielding paints can dry and flake, causing electrical shorts, so it's a good idea to make sure the paint has a good key and to lacquer over it, but more on that to come. So 2 body accessories. I'm using a genuine Fender Telecaster bridge plate, and this is the string through body type. Now this is a stamped Fender USA plate and comes ready aged and looks much the same as the Fender Custom Shop parts, minus a serial number. Although I would say the metal appears to be slightly thinner, and this was £21.95. Now the 4 body plate mounting screws, non-Fender, were purchased separately, and they needed aged using hydrochloric acid, and these were £2. The back body string ferrules are vintage aged, they're non-branded, and they look and feel really good at £5.50. The 3 brass saddles are by GoTo, and these are compensated, as well as having Allen key grub screws for height adjustment. These were cheaper than the Fender alternative, and I have to say, also much nicer to use. I always found the slotted screws in my 50s and 60s Custom Shop saddles can cut into your hand when pan muting, and I paid $19.99 for this set. Now, the brass once again was tarnished to look less shiny. Regarding bridge saddle parts, again, this is an area that you really don't want to cheap out on. These are responsible for setting action and intonation, and along with the nut, an area you don't want to have any string binding. So, body accessories, strap buttons. Now, I've gone for Telecaster strap buttons and screws. These are from the road-worn line as they fit the general period of the guitar, and I prefer them over the modern types, and they were $6.99. I decided on a genuine Fender backplate as the pickups and control panel electrics, along with a Fender branded bridge plate, are the heart of the Fender tone. A Fender backplate seemed appropriate, and this plate was $18.99. Now, the body accessories, scratch plate in the screws. At $9.99 for a pickguard non-branded, I pondered what to go for here. A more modern look would be a white guard and a tortoiseshell type finish, which I have in my 60s Custom Shop Tele, would give it a certain period look. And then there's, of course, the vintage white paraloid finish, which would work well with the blue. Whatever I do choose, it will be held on by these aged Telecaster style pickguard screws at £3. So the neck, machine heads. These are vintage Fender-esque style Telecaster step machine heads, and they come with the shaft ferrules and screws. These are once again made by GoTo, and they really are very nicely done. This did need checking out with the neck manufacturer to make sure that everything was going to be correct fitting. At £52, they're certainly not the cheapest out there, but this is another area where you don't really want to skimp out. The nut, an item often overlooked in regard to tuning stability, let alone action and intonation, is the nut. And this is a bone nut pre-cut for a 7.25 radius. It has a small lip, so you can also use it with a flat fretboard. So I'll need to cut that out of the way. And this was $10.95. The string tree, another non-branded part. This is an aged early Telecaster string tree with screw fitting. And at this time, I'm not sure if I'm going to be using it. As at the time I had issues ordering parts, I just bought it, just in case it went out of stock, and it was only £2.85. For the two main logos and several serial number decal copies, this was $25.98. As previously mentioned, I looked at the cost of buying a pack of inkjet transfer paper, and it's not cheap, and thought about the issue of print definition on small print and issues with non-light fasting fading over time. It really was a no-brainer to get a company that specialises in professional transfer products. Now, there is another item or two, but that's for another video, one of which might just be a wee surprise, and some of you might just inquire how you can get this for yourself. So stay tuned, subscribe, and all will be revealed. So aging chrome and nickel parts. This is where I say this is really dangerous to your health if you don't follow proper procedure, because in this section I'm using hydrochloric acid, and you don't want that on your skin, in your eyes, or the vapour in your lungs. Chrome plating is a pest to deal with when it comes to the aged look. If you can get the parts in nickel, then do so. That's much easier. You can use vinegar with that. Now, some folks use Scotch-Brite abrasive pads to knock down the shiny surface, which for me is not the look that I want. And that really only leaves hydrochloric acid, which is a popular weapon of choice for most folks that do this. Now, you don't need much, and you don't put the parts into the liquid. If you do that, nothing will happen. It's the vapour that affects the chrome surface. To begin, I sort out all the parts I'm looking to age that are chrome plated, and these are given a good polish. You've got to get them clean to make sure no waxy residue is on them or any fingerprints, because if you don't, these marks will show up once they're etched. In regard to other parts that are nickel plated, these can actually be tarnished doing the same process, but by simply letting the fumes do that from white vinegar. and that will tarnish them nicely. Here you can see the stages that the chrome neck plate has gone through. The first stage was around 8 hours, and this was followed by another 8 hours, and I'm going to stop there. I don't want any further damage. Conclusion, final thoughts. In part 5, I'll be preparing both the body and neck for relicking, which includes lacquer checking. But in regard to thoughts to share so far, well, working out all the parts that you need that are going to affect the body design or the neck layout, that is an important consideration. You don't want to have to route out the body if your pickups don't fit, for example. If you want a high quality instrument that's a joy to play, that's going to be important to you, as mentioned, there are parts and accessories you just don't want to cheap out on. It's a false economy. There are areas you don't have to spend much on. For example, a genuine branded Fender backplate around £20. It's not important, and you can get an unmarked one or a cheap knockoff for £5. Building your own loaded control plates can also save you a good amount of money. In regard to using acids to age chrome, this has to be done very, very carefully. Do take care of your health. Some of these products are very harmful. Don't ignore safety advice. And if possible, purchase nickel-plated products if you want to age them. As I say, that can be done effectively and safely with white vinegar and sometimes salt. And again, above all, enjoy the journey. Please do think about subscribing, hit the bell to get notified for part 5. Like and share as always. It really does help the channel out. Do check out my channel playlists, which cover my journey back to playing and recording guitar after a 40-year break. Lots of equipment reviews as I seek out the gear that I use in recording. So whether you're a newcomer, an ongoing player, or like me, an old hand returning to guitar playing, I always take the time to engage with folks who take the time to comment. So until next time, the journey continues. Do take care.